I was born in Holland, May 11, 1945. The war ended on May 6th in Europe. I was born to a generation that had gone through the war in Holland. Just the whole nature and the presence of Canadian troops involved in the liberation led to a mass emigration from Holland to Canada, and I was one of those people that came with my family in 1950. Landed in Halifax and made our way out west and settled in Burnaby very quickly after that. My dad owned a dairy in Holland and basically had a sponsor to come to Canada, and the sponsor arranged work with them for him with Palm Dairies, which eventually worked its way into Dairyland. But yeah, he had a job at Palm Dairies waiting for him. Wanted all his kids to go to university, and we did. That was part of the dream. And when we all had gone through, he saw fit himself to basically educate himself to a degree and went into real estate. Very, very supportive of the family, stay-at-home mom. Most moms in that day and age were. In many ways, a very independent person, but you know, an immigrant family in those times in Canada, 5 kids. I have 4 siblings, and everybody did their bit. You know, I used to, and all my brothers, we all had paper routes, and we had to turn over 2/3 of our earnings to the family. And that, you know, just indicated, you know, the sort of context that my mother operated within. It was all aims and goals that were defined by the well-being of the family. They were fabulous at everything, right? We used to, not that it was school-related, but we used to play lacrosse against New Westminster, and, you know, we would just get our butts whipped at everything. A funny thing happened in my second year bantam. We used to play New Westminster. There was 2 teams, one from Sapperton and one from Queensborough. We used to call Queensborough the United Nations. Guys like Racina, Antonimenko, Oldershaw, incredible athletes. They were just wonderfully gifted, and we simply never beat them. In my second year bantam, life changed for us in Burnaby. And that was on about a 3-bedroom home on Imperial Street in Burnaby. The Schmear family, 11 of them, moved into this home. And with Polly and Johnny Schmear, for us that were always losing and getting whopped in you know, getting the stuffings beating out of us, our life changed overnight. These guys were incredible, the kind of stuff that we had not seen before. They would stand up for us, and life changed for all of us that were on those teams. At the start, they were better athletes than they were lacrosse players, but they caught on quickly. Both Paul and John were very good junior players, and as you say, started concentrating on hockey pursuits. But yeah, they changed things for people in Burnaby. There was a mushroom farm across Canada Way, a couple of 100 yards from where we lived, and a guy by the name of Bob Bateman, and the Bateman family lived there. Bob Bateman was a lacrosse player. His dad was an usher at the Salmonbellies games. And they had these huge mushroom barns, which actually was great for playing lacrosse around, because you could paint a goal on the mushroom barn, and you could shoot and you wouldn't lose the ball. It would just come back to you if you missed. Nobody had nets in those days. So guys like Mike Gates, Charlie Saunders, Dave Torrey, from all over the lower mainland, guys would, from the junior bellies, would come and play you know, against this mushroom barn, and that's how I got introduced to the game, and spent a lifetime at Richmond Park in Burnaby, And because Bob Bateman's dad was an usher, we used to get into the games for nothing at, remember when Queen's Park had chicken wire around it? And if you stood in the upper concourse, there was just nothing but a blue haze from about 20 feet up. People, how that place didn't go up in smoke, I have no idea. But if you were standing in the upper concourse, you could not see across the floor to the other concourse. People used to smoke while they were watching lacrosse games. And in retrospect, it's just wonderful stuff to think about in that day and age. I was 6 when I started playing for a guy that now is in the Hall of Fame, a guy by the name of George Pittendry. And there was another guy in Queensborough by the name of Chick Anderson who also was in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, we got these rivalries going and played all the way through to Juvenile A in New Westminster, and then went to tried out for junior in New West. They were loaded, went to Coquitlam. Played junior in Coquitlam, started playing some games with the Adanacs, moved back to New Westminster, played a limited amount of games with the Salmonbellies. Yeah, I had reached my level of, that was as high as I was going to go as I'd ever made it really as a regular player. You know, that was a day and age where at the beginning nobody had TV. And for the longest time, my family didn't have TV. So for us to go watch people like one of the greatest lines that I've had occasion to see, Sepka, Stewart, and Barkley. And other people would argue that from the Berards, that Gimple, Usselman, and Carey were as good. I think a case could be made for both. From Victoria, people like Whitey Severson, Browning, Geordie Johnson, goaltender, from Nanaimo, Ashby, McKay. We didn't have TV in those days. These guys were larger than life. It wouldn't be stretching it to say that for a New Westminster kid or a kid watching New Westminster, some of these guys, Chisholm, people, Babcock, Survey, you grew up hating these guys. You just, like, they were detestable. The funny thing is that you become a general manager and you get involved later and you meet people, all incredibly good people, and you wonder how you ever had so much antipathy towards them. But that's, and it was the same thing when the Salmonbellies went into somewhere. People just, the hate was palpable, and it fueled the game. I don't have it from the same perspective because I was not a New Westminster kid. So New Westminster, other than the Salmonbellies, New Westminster was not something I was particularly fond of. They, as I said before, we used to get our lunch handed to us every time we played New West. But I do know this, is I was a huge Salmonbellies fan, and they were the good guys, and anybody else that was in town against them were the bad guys. But, some of them made it, with guys like Dugan and Chisholm and people like that who all were incredibly good lacrosse players. But they made it really easy to dislike them because they were so good. Pretty soon after I came back home from university, I started coaching minors in Burnaby and went up through the system in Burnaby and ended up coaching Junior B in Burnaby. We were very, very successful with an organization as loaded as Burnaby was. I think anybody could have been successful, but a lot of the players that went on through the system into Burnaby into great careers in Senior B actually came through Junior B. And late in 1979, I got a call from the Salmonbellies. Would I be interested in coming on board as a general manager? And frankly, I was taken aback. I thought it was an honor, and I jumped at the opportunity. We went to the Man Cup that year. We beat a very, very good Coquitlam team. And I don't know if the same set of circumstances arose again, that the same result would come out, but be that as it may, it did. And we went and played the Man Cup in Brampton. We're totally unprepared for it. What happened in '76 is the Salmonbellies won out east, lost a lot of their talent. We're still rebuilding in '80. Prior to my arrival, they had made some extremely good draft choices. They had players like Cowison. They're actually, the top end of their lineup from first to 10 players was actually pretty established. Lacked the depth though. As a holdover from the '80 team when we went to Brampton, we started the '81 season horrendously. We simply, I don't know, something about that team, and it didn't gel. I just felt that we had to make a move, and I did make a move. And we were 4-14 at the time. Went in, made a move, and I had hoped to get a coach. In the meantime, I was going to step in until I could get a coach. We caught fire, and after I made the change, we lost the next game in Vancouver to the Burrards. I think the score was 13-10, and I'm going home, traveling along how you come back from Vancouver, and you think, whoa, maybe this wasn't a good move. Anyway, we caught fire and didn't lose again that year. We closed out the season with 5 more wins. We won the semifinals and the finals 4 straight, and won the Man Cup 4 straight. So that was not exactly planned the way it was, but it happened. The next year, the president quit, and I assumed that position. And just from a general perspective, whatever the organization needed from that point on, I generally filled it. And sometimes, for the longest time, that was as president and also general manager. And again, in '89, a situation arose where John Hanna and I co-coached. And we he did most of the coaching, and I credit him a lot. We won the Man Cup in '89. Interesting thing, after '81 season, in the last minute of that game, it was Game 4 against Brampton. We won 4 straight. In the last minute of that, Roddy Bannister fired a long pass from Goss, who was coming off the bench. And I think there was, at the time that happened, there was about 40 seconds left. And Goss came off the bench, out the door, picked up the long pass, went in and scored. It was the last goal of the game, but the incredible thing was, at least at that time, it was Goss's 87th Man Cup point, which moved him ahead of Parnell. You woke up thinking lacrosse, and you went to bed thinking lacrosse, right? That's just the way it was. We had a good organization, lots of people to help, and yeah, you know, when you start going down the path that we were, and we were very lucky the first 2 years to go to the Man Cup. You know, and this is not to blow our own horn. But success breeds success. People want to come to that, right? Being part of the W and the Fish was very helpful, and we capitalized on that a lot. We went to the Man Cup 11 times in 16 years, and you know, that really breeds success. And we did a lot of the work in terms of the draft. But I will say that in '80. When we went and played in Brampton, for me that was a huge education, because not only did we get beat on the floor, Gus McCauley, everybody knows him from hockey fame. I saw stuff that simply I had not seen before. You didn't see that out here. You didn't see it at Junior B, and I had never seen it. I'd never been exposed to it. But I mean, these guys were playing for keeps, and I hadn't seen stuff like that. I hadn't seen players treat other players like that. And very quickly we came to the realization that winning the West and getting the tar beat out of you by the East is not fun. And we changed our whole game plan. We changed our whole game plan over to who it was we were going after. We started going after people that could handle themselves. You know, you can look at our lineup, but we had teams that were built not only to be great lacrosse players. We went after people like Steve Manning, Terry Oyam, Ross Angelucci, people that, you know, really could handle themselves on the floor. And we just basically built teams that said, however you want to play lacrosse, we'll play your way, but you're not going to beat us up anymore. I watched and grew up in a game where, you know, your singers and dancers danced and your knuckle draggers went up against your knuckle draggers, right? That's the game I learned. As soon as we started playing the East, that wasn't the case, right? Your good players, your singers and dancers would start getting chopped down. At the beginning, we would go after their knuckle draggers and think you're getting even by getting into a scrap with these guys. You know, it took us a little bit to figure out, but eventually we did. And all that ever stopped when we stopped going after their knuckle draggers and started going after their singers and dancers like they were going after ours. That's when it stopped, right? But it took us a while to figure that out. And we changed the whole composition of our team. For as long as I was involved, that's how we started building our teams. It just made sense to you that again, not to be repetitive, but getting the tar whacked out of you in a Mann Cup series is not fun. That actually went on for an hour and 15 minutes. At that time, Peterborough was a wonderful fishing ground for us, no pun intended. It started when Sean Quinlan came to us from Peterborough. And Peterborough was in a bit of an economic downturn. And we started getting people coming out from Peterborough out west, and some of them we didn't even know they were coming until they arrived here. Or they'd come out here for a holiday and they'd stay. The point that I'm making is that we went into Brooklyn on the Mann Cup. Half the place was cheering for the Salmonbellies because they were from Peterborough. Anyway, there was a guy by a pickup, Brian Nicola, got into an altercation with John Fusco. All hell broke loose. We had Lyle Robinson and Steve Manning had already been ejected from the game for fights that they were in. They were in the dressing room. They came back out. All hell broke loose for an hour and 15 minutes, and I was up in the press box up top, and within very short time there was a lot of police. There was stuff going on in the stands between Peterborough and Brooklyn. I had never seen anything like it. It was just a full-out brawl, and we had a very, very physical team at that time. And yeah, the series was very quickly over after that. That was the only time, out of several times we went out east, that was the only time we won. A lot of the teams started going offense, defense, right? And drastically changed the game. We talked prior to our interview about the kinds of changes that Jim Bishop and Morley Kells ushered into the game. That was in '68, and they started thinking in those kinds of terms. Took a long time for a lot of the other teams to get into it. I know we had some coaches. Bill Monroe resisted that. Great coach, but really like the playing at the both ends of the floor. Took some coaches longer than others to adapt, but eventually the whole game switched over. When you see teams change and change methodologies, and they start winning while they're doing it, then people fall in line pretty quickly. And that's what happened. It certainly has changed the game. The advent of the plastic stick and the exit of the wooden stick changed the game a lot. I think took a lot of the slashing out of the game. And yeah, I don't have a problem with that. It's great lacrosse being played, but it's a very, very different game. But the slash in the old days, people talk about going after each other's fingers, and people did. There's no question about that. But a good slasher was a very effective way to just dislodge the ball, and that was the intent of a slash. And you watch the game, and some people were, in terms of going to the elbows and lodging the ball loose, some people were exceedingly good at what they did, and that's a part of the game that's gone, but it's been replaced by several others. I think the game is in an upturn, and I like what's going on. Well, it had to be '86 when we won on the road. We had a really a packed team, and the league was very good at that time. We were heavy with talent, but Coquitlam was too. Coquitlam had very, very good teams. The Burrards were, for the longest time, as they transitioned from one place to another, they were trying to find a home from Vancouver. They had tough days. Of course, I'm going to lean into Salmonbellies like Goss and Dean and Cowison, and the list goes on. Robinson, the list goes on. But when you look at Victoria, Kevin Alexander was a magnificent ball player, just pound for pound, one of the toughest ball players I've been, the opportunity to see. The Gates, after they came back from Syracuse and looked like different people once they got on their program. Incredible lacrosse players. The lacrosse had not seen that skill and that kind of a body type before. To watch both Gary and Paul go down the floor when there's three guys back and act like they're on a fast break and be able to score. Nobody had seen that kind of stuff before. They were so physical and so good at what they did, right? And Nanaimo, Barney Evans, Ted Greaves, fantastic ball players. Vancouver, of course, they had Tavares for a while. They had great ball players: Coquitlam, Veltman, Aitchison. So many wonderful ball players that just have come through this league. All parts of it, incredible ball players. But I'm going to start and I'm going to finish with the Bellies on that, because when you draft people, you get people. Some of them have girlfriends. You see them. You go to their weddings. You go to their kids. Eventually, many years later, you go to their kids' weddings. Wonderful human beings, and I had occasion, even when I was later on commissioner, you come into contact with a lot of people. The Careys and the Gimples and the Esselmans have traveled with them, other people in other parts of the league, and you get talking to them and you get to know them, and you think, how did I ever dislike those guys, right? Because many of them are such magnificent. John Servey, Peter Black, right? Great human beings. And you wonder how you ever disliked those guys. In terms of our lineup, from player 1 to 12 probably has as good a lineup. Some of our players were, on they were playing on the back nine of their career. But we had Steve Manning and Jackie Fulton that were coaching, and the finest coaches from an overall game plan, to basically self-discipline, teaching the finer points of the game, all the small stuff. Those two really stood out in terms of organizing a ball team and instilling purpose, focus, self-discipline. Quite extraordinary. Steve Deason was heart and soul. He wasn't the same kind of coach as Manning and Fulton, but he was the kind of a guy that you'd go through the wall with him, because he'd go through the wall for you, right? Not the same type. And then, you know, a guy like Bill Monroe, I don't know if you know him or of him. He came from Victoria. He moved to the Lower Mainland. Very volatile guy. It wasn't uncommon where he'd find me between periods, and if somebody had made a bad shift or somebody had a bad shift, he'd find me after the second period and say, I want you to trade that guy, right? Bill, get back in the dressing room, like, calm down, right? He would hunt me down, want to trade after the second period, like, get this done. Anyway, every dressing room's different. And we've really had wonderful coaches over that period of time. My wife, whatever I've done, politics or sports or whatever, you know, if you don't get buy-in, there's trouble on the home front. Great supporter, absolutely. Loved the Bellies and you know, the camaraderie and the social aspect of it. A lot of the other teams just became a lot better at what they did, right? And I think you will not see anybody in a WLA operation that isn't extremely well prepared. Before, we were fairly successful. We had a supportive community. We could find jobs for people. And I wasn't as lucky as my predecessor in the fact that I couldn't load up the fire department, but we did have situations where you know, we had friends at Cablevision and wherever it was. Some of them went to work in mills. We were fairly lucky in being able to find jobs for the people that came out. So for the longest time, we got people from Peterborough. What happened, basically, you know, people like Doc Hedges got involved in Coquitlam, excuse me, and they started finding ways to fund their team, found their players jobs. Other teams just got really good at what they were doing, and yeah, I think the league evened out a lot. What's changed? People are getting paid. They don't have to find them work because somehow they're finding enough money to, you know, to pay players, and they stay out here for the amount of time that the season is on, and they move on. I think that has been a significant change. You know, when you get a superstar that comes in for 4 games and meets the eligibility to play in the playoffs, he comes in for the playoffs. There's somebody that's been in that dressing room for the whole year that's moved out. And bonds are set, and yeah, they're managing a dressing room today that, you know, back when I was a general manager, we didn't have to worry about at least those kinds of things. Ben lived 3 or 4 houses on the Burnaby side of the border. So Ben got special clearance. How that happened, I don't know. I wasn't part of that. But to play junior in New Westminster, because he had played all of his minor. He was drafted by the Burrards and actually sat out his first year. And in those days, and the rules have changed, in those days, if you sat out of the WLA for 2 years, you were a total free agent. So he sat out the first year, and right up until the July deadline, just prior to that, the Burrards, realizing they were going to lose him anyway, made a deal for him. Speaking the issue of free agency. In addition to an issue with Sohan in how we acquired Dave Durrani, there was one board meeting where the rule was changed from 2 years of free agency, 2 years of sitting out to get free agency, to 1. The league voted for it, and it took some of us about a 1/16 of a second to realize that right at the moment that vote was taken, that there was about 10 or 12 free agents floating around the Lower Mainland. At that time, one of the general managers in the room had to go to the washroom. He didn't come back, left his briefcase there. It didn't take the rest of us very long to figure out what was going on. He was phoning free agents. So without any adjournment or anything else like that, basically everybody stampeded out of the room, and the meeting was over. Anyway, that was how Steve Manning and John Kurgovich came to the Salmonbellies, and other players went to other teams. But just one of those funny moments. One of the general managers was so quick getting out of there that he actually left his briefcase in the hotel. Yeah, funny story.